Hi, I'm Ron Sprunberg, co-founder and CEO of Hi Mama. Welcome to our podcast about all things early childhood education.
In this week's episode, we have an insightful conversation about continuous professional learning as an early childhood educator and the importance of sharing your learnings and stories with others in the early years community, in particular online. We speak with Deborah Stewart, the owner and operator of Teach Preschool Blog, as well as the Children's Studio Preschool in Indiana. We explore how Deborah has used the Children's Studio as a lab school for learning about children's development and the Teach Preschool blog for sharing her learnings with others on the internet for the forward progression of early childhood educators as professionals. To get inspired by an early childhood educator who is always learning and find out how and where you can share your work as an early childhood educator, stay tuned for this week's episode of the Preschool Podcast. Deborah, welcome to the Preschool Podcast. So great to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. First question for you, which I like to ask all of our guests, what got you involved in early childhood education?
Oh, wow. Well, I started when I was in high school, and I was teaching at a church, and they needed somebody to fill in, and all they had were us high school students to do it. And so I signed up for the job and just stayed with it. Just built my passion for early childhood education. Back then, it was just all about playing with little ones. But over time, I went and got myself educated and took on a real job and have stayed with it ever since.
Cool. And so you have your own preschool. Is that right?
I do. It's called the Children's Studio. It's a small part-time preschool that operates not in my home, but it is on our home property. We have a separate building. It's a 2-story building with our pre-kindergarten class being in the upper level and our younger students, preschool, ages 3 to 5, the 3-year-olds being in the lower half.
Cool. And you refer to your preschool as a lab school on your blog, which we'll get around to a little bit later as well.
Okay.
And curious to know, what does that mean to you?
Well, when I started the Children's Studio is called that because it was my place to study early learning. I've been with early childhood now for over 30 years, and I've always been in other people's programs operating on their terms, and I wanted to be able to explore the things I was learning about early childhood education with my own little body of students. And so that's why I opened what we call the studio. So it's a place where I study early learning, I photograph it, and I observe it, document it through my blog, and share it with others to inspire, maybe educate a little bit, and but mostly a chance for me just to really wrap my head around what really seems to be working well and why with today's students.
And why do you think that you took the approach of calling it a lab school or a studio where you can learn and study versus just saying, hey, I'm going to open up a preschool?
Well, it was very important for me to make sure my parents understood that on one hand, we would be documenting through photographs everything their students did within reason. We don't document things that would put them in a negative light or obviously private moments, but they're learning in action. And so it was very important to me to be very clear to my parents that they were coming into a program where I was going to not specify a certain philosophy, not specify certain things that would be certain outcomes, but rather observe as we went along and keep a very open and fluid door of communication with my parents about their child's needs. So on one hand, I'm having to balance, and when I went into this, I really had only intended to use it as just a space for me to bring students in and observe learning and try different things. But I realized you can't do that without building relationships and having something that they need met. And so then I quickly realized it needed to actually be a simulation of an actual preschool that people traditionally offer in this area. And so in this area, it's usually starts at age 3 typically and goes to age 5. And it's anywhere from 2 to 3 days, sometimes 4 and 5 days, depending on the program. I can't personally and physically handle 5 days a week. So we do 3 days because it all falls on me, the cleaning, the setup, the arrangement, the students, the staffing, all of that. So I do 3 days a week with my students and give them the experience of having a real preschool program. So in their mind, in my parents' mind, they're bringing their children to preschool. But it was also very important to understand, and for them to understand from the get-go. It says it in our parent handbook and agreement. I've had to formalize some of this over time for their sake, that this is a place that I study and I will be sharing in order to I have a passion for young teachers, such as you do, who are coming into the field. It is so overwhelming, and it's so easy to lose your way or not have a way at all. And I felt like this would be a great opportunity for me to just show them, not talk about it, but actually show them what it looks like, what it can feel like, what it can be like through my photographs. And now we're doing a little more dabbling in video, but photographs is what I have primarily depended on.
And so you share a lot of this content through your blog, Teach Preschool Blog. Is that the main reason why you started Teach Preschool? Was it to share these, real observations of children's activities and learning and development in school or classroom group type environment?
It was the sole reason. When I first started the blog, I didn't have the school. You need to understand, I had the blog first. I was working at other schools and realized that I couldn't effectively share what I believed was working, what I believed was best, and photograph it in someone else's environment. And so I left the schools and decided to do my own, but I was already blogging for about maybe less than a year. And what happened was, if I go back just a little bit, the blog itself came because I was kind of in a place I'd been teaching, directing, writing curriculum, and then I was in a place where I was training teachers, going from classroom to classroom, wearing myself out one at a time, one teacher at a time, one classroom at a time. And you just feel like by the time you get to one classroom, you have to start all over and go back to the beginning with the first one because teacher turnover is high in these programs. And so I felt like it was just a lot of work, but it wasn't making a difference. And I have such a high regard and passion for what needs to be happening with these young children and these teachers, and that it can be successful. And then I went online and saw some teachers, just everyday classroom teachers, sharing some of the things they were doing in their classroom. And I have to tell you, they were so inspiring to me. And I'm like, I know that if this inspires me, it can inspire others, but other people aren't seeing it. And this was in 2009. And so I started Facebook. And back then I just sent out, I broke all the Facebook rules that you have now, but back then you could do it. And you just sent random messages to people you didn't even know because maybe they had preschool in their profile and said, hey, I'm sharing this really cool stuff. You want to check it out? You can friend me. And if you don't like it, you can unfriend me because they didn't have pages yet. And so people would friend me out of the blue and just stay friends. And then eventually we converted to the page and we shut down the profile. But from there, I realized, though, I could share lots of other people's work, but I really wanted to share my own work. I really wanted to study early learning in my own environment. And I wanted to stay culturally relevant to today's trends. A lot of the books and a lot of the things I read don't take into account to today's technological world, to the parenting lifestyles. There's so many lifestyle changes in today's world, and they're happening rapidly, and they're very strong and very much present in our children's lives. And so I wouldn't say I work in an environment that represents adequately all the different cultural differences that are out there, but I definitely feel like at least I'm doing my best in my area to stay as relevant as I can to what these young families are dealing with day to day. And so anyway, after blogging without having the resources on my own and starting Facebook and realizing I really, really wanted to be able to do this on my own, I went to my husband and said, hey, can I convert that garage over there into a preschool and a studio? And I'm just going to have about 4 or 5 kids. Well, he knows better. And so now we have about 24 students enrolled. And I don't promote it. I don't promote it online. I don't promote it anywhere. I don't advertise. The school itself is built by families who have just stumbled on us for whatever reason and have shared it, because I'm not necessarily I'm not trying to run a preschool. I'm not running a business. The school is my place of study so that I can write about all of this through my online work.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, you have created, I guess, what I might call an online community where you can share observations and information about your studying of early learning at the Children's Studio. And this has been a topic that's come up before in previous podcast episodes about the importance of sharing this type of information with others in the early childhood education community. And it sounds like you were quite progressive in starting this back in 2009. What has been the most rewarding part of this for you?
I don't know. It changes. I won't say that it comes without its stressors. It's been a lot of work to reach out. You feel a lot of risk. You feel very vulnerable. I can almost tell you more of the negatives than the positives. But I would say the rewarding side is when someone writes me. The different people write me and they tell me, for example, I have a lot of professors that will write me that I never expected to have any reason to follow anything I do. And when they write me and tell me, hey, I'm sending my students this way, I really want them to get this. And I'm like, when you have other professionals that you respect, acknowledge your work and feel like it's valuable enough to send their teachers to come and take a look and that I have something to share and they trust me with that, that's pretty heavy stuff. I mean, that's pretty rewarding. And it makes me say, okay, 1, I'm on the right track. 2, it is being valued by people that I feel like I'm trying to reach. And then they're sharing it with their young teachers who ultimately I hope will benefit the most.
Interesting. And I want to talk about the negatives, which you mentioned, because I think an online community doing very, very similar to what you're doing with Teach Preschool Blog is very important, but there's challenges. What are those?
Oh my goodness. Well, the first one is, of course you have to, in my case, my parents are aware of what I'm doing, but you have to be very sensitive to the needs of your students in the process, especially if you're going to share photos of your students. And it can be things that you do not even think about. So let's say a student is writing on a sign-in sheet and they're using the wrong hand grip. Well, you might get lambasted, quite frankly, online because they're holding the pencil wrong. And then everybody wants to be the teacher telling you how to hold the pencil. In the meantime, you're just wanting to make sure this parent realizes he's fine. He'll learn it later. It's not necessary, so you're trying to balance between everybody being the expert and the needs and understanding the needs of the parent and the child and helping parents realize it's okay. So I've gotten very adept at that. I've learned what photos not to share because it puts the child at risk and the parent at risk of being worried about something, and how to take photos of things that keep people's focus on what it is I'm trying to get them to focus on. It's not the handwriting grip at this point, So that's one example. Keeping that balance between your parents and your students and protecting their interests and keeping them being a supportive person in their lives and at the same time sharing what it is you're trying to share is difficult to balance. Getting recognized online or getting yourself out there is a lot of work. It's not something that you press go and, oh boy, here they all come running. It isn't like that. It's a constant, you have to be social, you have to be out there. And so it feels risky at times because you put your idea out there and somebody may or may not like it and you've got to have a little bit of a thick skin and be able to tolerate that. You have to be able to be okay with people having different views. But in that respect, and I know we're going to talk about that, you will learn more than you ever thought you needed to learn. But at the same time, that learning curve that you didn't know you were on all of a sudden becomes very difficult too. And so, but the challenges come from the range of being able to manage and deal with lots and lots of people from lots of backgrounds and lots of positions, and handle them in a way that stays professional, stays focused on your goal, doesn't discourage you, doesn't create this stress. And a lot of people can't handle it, and so they stop, and I understand. And for me, I have moments where I'm like, boo-hoo, and then other times where I'm like, okay, it's fine, I'm okay, move on. And then just keeping up. It's social networking is a 24/7 job, and so you get lots of emails. So people will send you a question that took them 2 seconds to write, but it takes you an hour to respond, and you have to learn to manage your time better and realize there are some questions you just have to be honest with them and say, I wish I could answer that for you, but I just can't, So it's a learning process. It's something that you're constantly dealing with. Then you have people who ultimately want to sell you things or have you promote their work or advertise for you or whatever. And you have to decide, do you want to turn it into money making, or what is your goal? What is your agenda? And I didn't have any of those in mind as I went along. And my one goal was to reach out and share what I loved. And I've stayed consistent with that. And so you have to decide what, up until now, and I'm always open as to which direction I'll take my blog, and from here, everything's open. But you have to kind of have a place to start, know who you're speaking to, know what you're writing for, and know why you're doing it. If it's to make money, that's one direction you might take it. If it's just to reach out and connect with others, that might be another direction. And if you're going to involve parents and families and photos of them, then you have to be sensitive of their needs. So, for example, I had a teacher ask me, what I'd really love to see is one day is a photo of one of your children falling apart on something. And I understood what she was asking, because she didn't feel like it's real life enough. But what I explained to her was that if I have a student falling apart, I'm not going to sit there and take a picture of it. I'm putting the camera down and addressing the issue. And so, and I'm not going to put that child's personal issues out. And what people think they want to see is that kind of stuff. But what they really need isn't that from me. They already have that. They already know what the problems are. What they need are what's working, what's great, what's amazing. I read a blog right in 2009, right at the beginning. These two girls from an infant room started their own blog, and they sent a message to me saying, come read our blog. And they'd written 3 posts, and each post lambasted parents for, they were super, obviously the girls were very using the social network to voice anonymously their anger with their job, whatever that may be. And so they were saying really hateful things about parents, and they shouldn't ever have kids and all of these things. And so I wrote them, and I just said, you haven't, first of all, you need to know that your parents deeply trust you with their children, or they wouldn't have them there. And if they knew you were saying these things, they would be very disappointed. So I hope they never figure it out. And number 2, that you have so many gifts. If you're really good at your job, share your gifts, because that's what people need to know about. They don't need to know this. They need to know what your gifts are and what you're good at and how they can be good and how you can enrich their lives. And while the girls, I think, tried, they were super sweet, and they did try, but I think they lasted like a couple more months, and then I didn't see their blog anymore. I think it lost its steam. But that would be my message, is always keep your message about what will be encouraging to others, what is going to inspire others. Don't use social networking if you're an educator at any level as your place to vent. It is not the place to do it.
Yeah, and I think the internet can bring out some strange behavior in people, right? Because of that anonymity, a lot of people express things that they might not otherwise without that anonymity that exists on the internet.
Well, and they're not necessarily anonymous as much as they'd like to think, especially teachers who get on Facebook and they maybe friend their families at some level, or someone's a friend of a family member and a friend of a friend. But you have to remember, every time you write a comment on like my Teach Preschool page, it's a public page, that comment is public for everyone to see. And you may think your parents aren't paying attention, but I wouldn't bank on that. I think that you have to know and be smart and be a professional. If you're talking early childhood education, talk in a professional manner in a public forum or private. I don't care what it is. If you're online, always maintain that professionalism. If you want to have a venting session or tell, you may think you sound really smart and bright, but I'm telling you, not everybody will feel that way. So if you have something to say that's not inspiring, encouraging, or somehow being critically, professionally in the process, I would really encourage you to think again about sharing it on a public page like a Facebook page or Instagram or anything else. And at the same time, go call a friend, use a phone, but I wouldn't use social networking for that purpose.
Professionalism, such a key word in early childhood education, and something that I am very keen on. Hi Mama is very keen on stressing in a lot of the work that we're doing, and I think you really, hit the nail on the head with that one. It's so important to be professional as early childhood educators if you want to be viewed by parents, by society at large as professionals, and that's both offline and online. So that's absolutely a point that's worth taking home for our audience. And also, it's really easy to pass judgment on other people who are sharing information online, but it's very hard to put yourself out there, put your ideas out there. And I think that's something that I think is also worth reiterating to the audience is that, if you're only commenting on what other people are putting out there, maybe you should think about opportunities for yourself to share some of your own work and your own thoughts about what you're doing with the children. And it doesn't even have to be photos or videos, but just sort of scenarios and how you've been able to manage those to get feedback.
Absolutely. And I will say there's been an improvement. When I first started sharing, people were really, really harsh. And I think they were in this mentality and in this frame of mode early on of just attack. And so you were so vulnerable. If you shared an idea, people would find things that may or may not have anything to do with what you thought it had to do with, and they would just target that and go after it. And sometimes I learned, I will say, though, in the process, I learned a lot about the practices that I employ and whether or not they are indeed the best idea. So if you can be teachable, you might be able to really learn from some of these people, even though maybe they're not being that kind about it. But it really caused me a lot of time to stop and reflect on, maybe are they right, or are they just, or do I need to stay the course? Why am I doing this, and do I believe in it? It makes you constantly reflect on your practice and whether or not you're doing what you want to do. So on one hand, it helps you, it pushes you to grow where you didn't know you needed to grow. But on the other hand, if you're one commenting on someone else's work and you target something in that, you need to understand that person put themselves out there. They're probably just a parent blogger who thinks their child is beautiful and did this fun idea. They didn't think it was going to become a point of discussion over whether something's developmentally appropriate or not. They just, in their moment, were enjoying it, and it worked well, and they wanted to share it with everybody else, and it got picked up by someone like me, and I appreciated it too, and I shared it, and then it goes on and on. That's what social networking does, and then it continues to grow and build and be shared. And somewhere in the loop of that, you might look at it and see something wrong with that idea, but your job is to look at that and see what the possibilities are, number one, and whether or not you can use them. Number two is to understand that no single moment represents an entire person's work, an entire mom's relationship with their child, entire teacher's work with their whole class. It's that one story, that one photo, that one video only represents that moment. And you need to appreciate it for that and understand that there's always much more deeper things happening around that environment that that photo's not going to show. So have a sense of perspective in the process.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason I like sharing information online, and I'm sure part of your goal with Teach Preschool as well, is to have dialogue and reflection about the content that's being shared. And I think as soon as you stop listening or reflecting and only opining as an expert, then you stop learning at that point. And that's absolutely what you said is, the reason you started the children's studio was so you could keep learning yourself. And even though you have so many years of experience working in a preschool setting, you're still learning, and you're listening and you're reflecting. But as soon as you stop learning and you think you're an expert at something, then you've kind of hit a plateau. And so I think that's a key lesson for sure for people that, if there's one thing you learn as an early childhood educator working with children that we're still just starting to understand how they learn, it's that you don't know all the answers.
Oh, no way. And it's pretty fascinating and amazing process. And so on one hand, if you go into the internet, whether you're just a reader or you're a blogger, and you come with the mindset that you have all the answers and you already have it all figured out, the minute someone disagrees with you, you're going to be set on the defensive, and you'll become even less of a learner. So you kind of got to put that mindset aside and go in with the idea of this is what works for me and that I do. And I think if you do it that way, so you get to share what you feel like you're an expert in. You also leave the door open for other people to come along and say, but in our classroom, this doesn't work. And then you're not feeling defensive about it. You're understanding that they're coming from their own perspective and it may or may not work for them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, you're also the author of a book called Ready for Kindergarten. Can you tell us what that's all about?
Well, the funny thing is that's actually a book that I was contracted to write for somebody else. So it's not really probably, if I were to write a book that I would want to write, that would not be the one. So I know it sounds like you're terrible at promoting your own book, Deb. Well, I am, because I mean, I wrote that in with parents in mind. It's really not intended for educators, although I think a really young, new educator could benefit from it. But I wrote it with the idea of parents in mind and how they can just take play-based practices and all that. I followed basically the guidelines here in Indiana of what's considered things they need to learn before they go to kindergarten, and so by the public school systems. And so I followed that, and I created kind of this context of information, easy to read, very simple to follow, things that they could do naturally, and they're maybe already doing, they just don't understand that that's a good thing. And I created these different categories of things that they can do to teach at home and to build the skills they need to prepare for kindergarten. And it is not an academic heavy book by any means. And some people don't like that, who are very academic focused. It is a very play-based focused, because I believe our job, and I stand by this 100%, is not in our young early preschool classes to send kids off as if they don't need kindergarten. It's to send them off to get ready for kindergarten, and those are two very different things. And so the book it supports my view of that. I would rather you be more concerned with whether or not your child can put on his own coat and wipe his own bottom and zip up his own zipper, and then whether or not he can read and write the alphabet. I don't care about that. And so before he goes to kindergarten, I want to know that he can self-regulate. He has healthy balance. He knows how to make a friend, all of these other things. So that book encompasses those ideals that I believe in. It's not that the book, I do love the book, but it was a contract book that was written in the way I was asked to write it. And so I did the best I could within their frame to make it my own. And that's what the book is about. And I do highly recommend it for parents or really young teachers who are new to the field. But one of these days, maybe I'll have time to write a book that is a little bit more reflective of my experiences.
And if you had that time, what would that book be about?
I don't know I can answer that yet. I feel like the blog itself is kind of my book. And so I don't know. I think that's why I haven't written it. It's not so much time as I haven't found something that wraps it all with a bow on top that I could put it in. I think because I'm still too much in the middle, my timeline has been to run my school until my youngest grandchild graduates, and she hasn't started yet. So when she gets through the preschool, so we have at least three. I'm 3 years out, maybe 4. If my daughter has another one, I might be 5. But yeah. I'm thinking we're done. But if I get the youngest, when the youngest grandchild, which I think is 3 to 4 years out, graduates preschool, I will close down the preschool. I will be done with that. And we have documented so much over the last 5 years since we've opened, and we'll continue to over the next 4. We literally take 300 to 400 photos every single day and archive those photos.
Wow.
Yes, we take a lot of photos. And every day we review them. Every day we archive them, put them where we can find them under certain categories and tags. And we share maybe, I share maybe 1 photo a day on Instagram out of 400, if that gives you an idea. So we have a lot of stuff, and one of these days I will have all that, and then I will retire the school and I will go solely into the writing. And that's always been my plan, is to one day just write. But I felt like I needed to have my resources in place, and that's part of this journey, is having that together.
Wow. Okay. That's quite rare. I mean, I would think there's, if you're not writing your book, I'm sure there's like a master's or PhD student out there in early childhood education who would love to have that amount of data.
Yeah, I'm happy to let them sign up. They can sign up for the job, because right now I couldn't do it if I wanted to. Time is certainly a factor, but it also is just because I don't have my head wrapped around that message yet. I'm still in the middle of the story, and my life work is my story. And one of these days, something will click and say, this is where you need to bring it, and who the audience is for that. But I don't have that yet.
A couple wrap-up questions that I ask everybody. First of all, what excites you most about what's happening in early childhood education right now?
I think that early childhood education was, for years, behind the wall. There was you and your little classroom, and the only people who seemed to care about anything you did were the parents that walked in and out, and some of them maybe you didn't feel like did, and your assistant teacher, who may or may not be that invested, and yourself. And you'd go home and you'd spill it all out on your husband, and that was the only person that could listen, and he got tired of hearing about it after 10 years, right? But he did anyway, right? But all of a sudden now you have this world of, the world has opened up through technology for early childhood educators to be informed, to know truth, to know don't tell me my boss says we can't do it because of this, because you don't have to do that anymore. You can go out and research the answers. You can know for yourself. So I love that early childhood is no longer confined by these 4 walls. Instead, they can network with each other. They can go out there and get inspiring ideas that make you get up and can't wait to go back to work the next day and give it a try. Even if it bombs, you'll go home, you'll go online, and you'll look again. And somewhere in the midst of that, you're going to learn something. So the ability to learn, the ability to continue to grow, I believe philosophy now is it's going to start making sense to young teachers, because it's being always talked about at some level in real life, real daily practice, rather than it being a book that you read about. And I read all that stuff when I was in high school. I remember reading Maria Montessori's entire book. But it wasn't until I put it into practice that I was able to take that and then all of a sudden see, oh, that's what she was talking about.
Right.
But I could have cared less back then. And for years, I could have cared less, because I was like, I don't understand why we have to learn this. Now it's different. Now I see it. But I would say I'm still learning to see it. But the internet has just opened those doors of getting it. And then, of course, it's also opened up I believe early childhood now more than ever since I started, 9 years ago, it certainly is in the public eye, up for discussion every day. The value of early childhood, the value of play, the value of the early childhood educator is now more front and center than ever. And so people come to me asking me if, their idea, do I approve of it? I mean, nobody would have cared whether I approved of it 10 years ago. Yeah. Right? They were like, it's cute, we're going to do it. But now people are very conscious of what they're doing and whether or not it is achieving the desired outcome that they're after. And so that's all really good. And so we have this entire world that's no longer hidden behind four walls, and it's spread out, and it's teaching each other. It's helping us apply practices, and most importantly, if young teachers in these classrooms will get plugged into these sites that are sharing early learning, learn which ones are of value, which ones they should probably avoid. I mean, you don't have to avoid any of them, but, think for yourself. But if these directors will plug their teachers in and get them excited, there's nothing better than a teacher coming back to work the next day. I don't care what the idea is, even if it sucks, okay? Even if it's an idea that you don't want your students doing. But that teacher is excited. She'll learn to balance it. She'll learn that it was really a dumb idea, but she was excited to try. And that is something we weren't seeing enough of, and we need to see more of.
Yeah, totally. Even just that idea of coming into work excited about trying something new and different speaks a lot for itself even. There's your blog, Teach Preschool, which is at teachpreschool.org, has some awesome content from the children's studio, which we talked about. We're also passionate about, where people can find all this awesome information online, which you just spoke about. So in addition to Teach Preschool, is there other resources or places where you go that you would recommend that are great for preschool teachers to get cool information about what's happening in early childhood education?
All right. Well, on Facebook, Facebook is inundated anymore with people providing ideas for early childhood education. Some of it's under the names of kid bloggers or mommy bloggers, and some of it's actual teachers. You'll learn, if you research enough, you'll learn to know the difference between someone that's just trying to sell a lot of worksheets and things they make, and someone that's really just sharing real life things that they've tried at home or in their classroom. And those are the ones you want to look for, the ones that are sharing real life things that aren't just about getting lots of people to like your post or to buy something, but is about sharing their passion. And those, if you can lock into those, they'll make the biggest difference in your classroom. They won't send you back to your classroom with ideas that look really cool but don't work. They'll send you back to the classroom because it worked in their room, and you could probably make it work in yours. Facebook. On Teach Preschool on Facebook, we share, we go through, and we've been sharing for 9 years now things that other teachers or parents write that we believe we could do in our classroom, or that we find inspiring for whatever reason. It can be a broad range of reasons. Some of it other people aren't happy with it, but I love it. And if I love it and I'm like, hey, I'd do that, I'd at least give it a try, then I'll share it. So on Facebook, Instagram is becoming probably one of my favorite places where people are sharing early learning ideas. And again, you start with one, and then you'll see that a lot of these people congregate together and they communicate with each other. And so pay attention to who is leaving comments on their blog or who they follow, on their Instagram page. And you'll get connected to other early childhood educators that are sharing. And there's some beautiful, absolutely beautiful works of early learning being shared. And they're very action focused on actual early learning in Instagram, because you have a very small window. So that photo has to really tell you a lot. So Instagram is my favorite. My least favorite, honestly, is Pinterest. But people it's gotten widely known over the last, I think, 4 or 5 years now. I've lost track when it started, as being the go-to place for finding stuff. But I find Pinterest to be overwhelming, number one. Number two, I find people go there looking for, people post, you have to understand that to get you to click on their Pinterest picture, they go through a lot of work to get that picture really cute and clickable. And so So you click on this really cute idea and you go to it and they've written this beautiful article about this really cute idea and you take it to your classroom and your kids could have cared less. And so you have to, so Pinterest to me has too much junk. I think you have to go to where the people are still behind it, writing the resources. I think that's why I like Instagram, because Instagram is usually, the Instagram is being written by the person that's in that classroom, that's sharing the photo, that's attesting to why it has value, and right there on the other end, ready to answer your question. Pinterest is, here's a cute idea. I made it photo ready for you. I'm going to drop it here, and I'm never going to come back and see your question, or I don't care what happens from there. I just hope a lot of people like and share it. So I think that's why I think I've kind of never been a big fan of Pinterest, although I do have an extensive Pinterest site where I collect and save everything for those who are interested. It's not my go-to source. I tend to go to Instagram. It's where I share what's on my heart once a day, sometimes more, and where I see a lot of my fellow educators doing that as well.
Wonderful. Well, Deborah, thanks so much for everything you've shared through Teach Preschool Blog, as well as what you've learned by starting that blog and having been involved with the Children's Studio and documenting all the cool things that are happening there and sharing those experiences. It's been great having you as a guest on the show.
Well, I've enjoyed the conversation, and I could talk all day about this stuff, as you can tell.
What's your name? Michaela, how are you?
Hi.
You having fun playing?
Yes.
It's a nice day, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. What's your favorite thing to play out here?
Playing monsters.
You like to play monsters? Do you like the swings? Okay. What else you like to do?
Play my Dora bike.
Oh, with your Dora bike? Oh, okay. Do you ride fast?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Well, have fun here. All right.